after the Prime Minister went to Canadians in a time of crisis, offered them his word, offered them hope, and then completely forgot about everything that he said on the campaign trail, or worse, possibly didn't mean any of it at all. The Liberal government has been spending all of that money for 6 months with no plan of accountability or accountability of how they're doing it. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, that's the budget watchdog in this place, says that the government has no fiscal anchors whatsoever. And if you've been listening to the Prime Minister before, then you might have heard a bunch of talk about operational budget versus capital budget. I guarantee you that they will come back 9 times out of 10 when we talk about the out-of-control spending. That's their response to it. But this is not a plan to balance the budget. It's just an absurd proposal to move the goalposts. They're changing their reporting standards that the nonpartisan fiscal watchdog has said will lead to less transparency and doesn't even meet the international standard. So why are we doing it? Well, it's simple. If you really want to know the reason why we're doing it, you can't actually stop the spending and want to brag about balancing a budget without doing that. And if you're trying to do that, you just change the way that you count. That's what we're seeing from them. It's like claiming you ran a marathon, but you quietly moved the finish line 20 meters up. None of this is fiscal responsibility. It's all financial theater. And you're going to see that on November 4th. What they're doing is trying to hide another broken promise of this Prime Minister and this Liberal government full of Liberal ministers who still sit in that front row. They're not going to be able to hide it for much longer because the fiscal watchdog says that we're at the precipice of a cliff. That means the government is spending more money than we can spend. More debt and more interest payments equals higher taxes, higher inflation, fewer jobs for Canadians, and less money spent on the very things that we need them spent on in this country, for services for Canadians. You can't keep doing this over and over again. That's what he said. And so it's time to stop lighting taxpayer money on fire, and it's long past time to toss out the Justin Trudeau fantasy novel on economics. Stop doing the same thing. Stop plagiarizing his work and start living in the real world where real people live paycheck to paycheck, where jobs are lost, where hope is no longer.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
Speaker, it's sad that the opposition is continuing to spread the divisive message at a time when pride and grit should really unite all Canadians around the challenges that we're facing. These aren't stats, she said, and she's right. These are slogans. The real stats are the following. We have the strongest credit rating in the world, AAA. We have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7. Right? We have one of the highest rate of growth in the G7 since 2020. The IMF and the OECD project that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7 this year. These are stats. These are real. The other thing she said is that the PM forgot what he said on the campaign trail. I would like to remind a member that we have increased salary for our armed forces, we have cut taxes for Canadians, we have launched a major project office, we have launched Build Canada Home. The question is, will she support us?
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, you're right that Canadian pride unites us, and you can tell that to the Prime Minister who moved his company out to New York because he realized that it was his own policies that would hurt the investors that invested in that company. You can tell the Prime Minister who doesn't pay his taxes in Canada about national pride. You can tell all you want to the worker in Oshawa that just lost their jobs because the Prime Minister can't get a deal on Ottawa. You can tell him all day long that the debt to GDP ratio is good. But what are you going to tell him when he can't put food on his table? And what are you going to tell him when he gets the pink slip? What are you going to tell the 86,000 workers who have been laid off in this country, the investment that has fled south? What are you going to tell all of those people whose livelihoods are on the line because this government can't control its addiction to spending?
Question et commentaire.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Drummond. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague's speech was very interesting. I think that this Conservative motion today finally brings something that the Blot can agree to. It's easy to say that this government's management is deficient. Things are getting worse. This government has to manage a financial crisis for Canadian and Quebec families, but it's decided to cut $90 billion in potential revenue by not imposing counter tariffs, by getting rid of the DST, amongst other things. But the Conservative austerity proposed is, well, what are they proposing exactly to stimulate the economy? Because we can't just cut everything. We also need measures to ensure that companies are prosperous and decide to invest in our economy.
Thornhill.
Well, I'm pleased that that my honourable colleague has is finally seeing the light in what the government is putting forward. Look, we have said time and time again that we have to build the Canadian economy with Canadian workers and Canadian investment here, with things like getting rid of the oil and gas cap so that the pipeline that potentially was approved 10 years ago that is back on the table can actually be filled with oil, that we can unleash the capacity of the private sector to invest here by cutting red tape and regulation. He has heard that time and time again, and I'm glad that he's finally standing up to oppose this government's reckless spending.
Yeah.
Questions and comments? Now, member for Calgary-Crowfoot.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I enjoyed that speech very much, and I was quite surprised by the line of questioning that came from the Liberals. They would have you think that we've never had it so good, that everything is rosy in Canada, that after 10 years of economic and fiscal vandalism, that Canadians should just congratulate this government for a job well done. They have broken every single promise they have made on deficits, debt, fiscal anchors, fiscal guardrails, whatever you want to call them. Would the member have any further comments on that with the remaining time?
Member for Thornhill in 40 seconds or less.
I will say this. The Prime Minister stood in front of Canadians at a time of crisis, and he asked for their support. He promised them that he was going to be the guy in the crisis to negotiate a deal. And since he's become Prime Minister, I will remind this House over and over again that $54 billion of net investment has fled south. He's promising to make that $1 trillion without the promise of even $1 coming back into our country. 86,000 jobs are gone. We have the second highest unemployment rate in this country. That is nothing to be proud of, and certainly things have been much, much better in this country.
Resuming debate. Well, please to debate the honourable member for Calgary-Crowfoot.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. $100 billion. No, that's not Dr. Evil's ransom demand from the world. That's today's headline in the National Post. $100 billion. That is the potential deficit that will be tabled in the budget in November. This is today's front page headline. And it's important that we consider how we got here. $100 billion deficit, staggering, Mr. Speaker. That's almost twice what the national transfer to provinces for health care. That's the amount of extra borrowing that is being piled on, and which the interest from that will eventually make us unable to spend money on health care and national defense and all the things that Canadians rely on from their governments. But how did we get here, Mr. Speaker? Well, this government in 2015 promised that they would run deficits, limited deficits for 3 years. They were the only party in that election promising to do so. Even the NDP back then knew that you could not borrow with impunity forever. So the Liberals were the only party promising a deficit, but they said, whoa, deficits are okay. This is going to be a short-term deficit. We're going to make historic investments in national infrastructure. We're going to make investments. Our deficits are investments, and that will lead to the budget balancing itself and make people more prosperous. So 10 years later, here we are, Mr. Speaker. We have an out-of-control structural deficit closing in on $100 billion annually. When they were elected, this promise of limited deficits followed by a balanced budget was immediately discarded. It was never, ever acknowledged after that. Bill Morneau was the finance minister. I attended question period after question period, the finance committee, appearances from that minister. He never acknowledged this solemn promise that clearly it was a point of differentiation between parties. It was part of what got this government elected in the first place. And it was a lie, Mr. Speaker. It was so obviously untrue what they had promised during the election compared to what they did in office. So they were elected, they passed a bunch of anti-business, anti-job, anti-industry bills like Bill C-69, Bill C-48. They led to immediate capital flight from Canada. $200 billion from the energy industry alone, Mr. Speaker, left this country on the election of this government. $500 billion of investment has left Canada since this government was elected. And so we are here today to call on this government to quit plagiarizing the playbook that has brought us to the point that we are today. So these out-of-control deficits, structural deficits that began under this government, they inherited a balanced budget, Mr. Speaker. That is clear. A balanced budget was tabled in 2015. The fiscal monitors that track spending in between show that we were on track to balance until the new spending of this government was brought in. So they received a balanced budget, they inherited one, they blew it immediately, and the capital flight that resulted from their out-of-control spending and anti-industry laws kicked in immediately and began to do what these policies always do everywhere where they've been tried from time to time, Mr. Speaker. They led to inflation. So we have out-of-control deficits, we got inflation, we have a cost of living crisis now, we have the worst performing economy in the G7 right now. They always talk about the G7 and say we're going to be the best in the G7. Well, they're the worst, Mr. Speaker. Our economy is no longer growing per capita. In fact, it has shrunk. It is lower per capita than it was in 2014, the final year of the Harper government. Per capita GDP is lower now than it was in 2014, Mr. Speaker. Think about that. That means Canadians are getting poorer over time. I don't even think a 10-year window that would cover the Depression would even reveal a period that long and that sustained of declining per capita GDP, or GDP that has shrunk. So we have lower wages, lost jobs, lost investment under this government. We call upon them to reverse course, get serious about the budget. So that brings us to the current Prime Minister. So as has been remarked by others, this was the guy that was supposed to know what to do. We said, okay, this 10 years of Trudeau, we're done. We need to actually have a serious person, have an adult in the room. And so they switched leaders, and this guy who was supposed to be the adult in the room, who knew finance because of his wonderful resume, came in and said, you know, this is a serious point of crisis. We're going to get serious. We're going to rein in spending. We're going to get control of the public finances, and so that we can grow the economy and deal with all the current challenges. Well, what's happened since then, Mr. Speaker? He didn't do any of that. This is a Prime Minister that promised Canadians that they were going to rein in the general bloat of government that has occurred under these Liberals. Mr. Speaker, the size of the public sector in Canada is the only thing that grew under this government. They added 100,000 federal public servants, and yet service gets no better for Canadians. They can't run anything over there, Mr. Speaker. 59,000 employees at the Canada Revenue Agency, and they still can't answer the phone, Mr. Speaker. So this government that was supposed to now have somebody serious at the helm that would get control of our finances and bring the budget under control, it hasn't happened. They promised in the election to rein in and reduce the expenditures on consultants. Well, in their first estimates that they tabled, they've gone from, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, 19 billion to 26 billion is what I recall, Mr. Speaker. They have increased their spending on consultants. I mean, they told Canadians that they were going to rein this in, that was the whole point of the change of leadership, and that there was a change of style. They keep talking about a new government, even though it's the same front bench and it's the same policies over the last 10 years. So it hasn't happened, Mr. Speaker. So now we're getting close to a new budget. Oh, and I might add that on top of the $500 billion in capital flight that has occurred under this government, that was all before the current Prime Minister arrived. And it has accelerated since then, Mr. Speaker. Another $60 billion has left the Canadian economy. And when investment dollars leave the country, that means there is no investment in plant and equipment and technology that help drive up productivity so that Canadians can earn more and live better, fuller lives and cope with the increased costs that have crept in under this government. But it's not happening. Wages are not rising. Unemployment is rising. 86,000. 900 jobs lost in my city last week, Mr. Speaker, in one layoff announced by Imperial Oil. So these guys have spent the last 10 years chasing investment and jobs especially out of the energy sector. And so we call on them to fulfill the promise that they made in the election and start getting serious, finally, about the budget. We had a PBO report and a PBO committee appearance in the last couple of weeks, Mr. Speaker, just devastating. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has said that this government's fiscal plan is unsustainable. Stupefying, he called it. He said that it is unsustainable, and he has said that, and we know, Mr. Speaker, that the latest thing, they're back to, they always claim these different measurements, declining debt to GDP ratio. Well, then when the debt to GDP ratio started to come up, then it was our AAA credit rating. You'll see them bait and switch every time on their goalposts here. But that credit rating is at risk because they've now got they're trying to trick Canadians with a new accounting methodology. Yeah. And as their deficits continue to get even worse and worse and worse. So it is time, Mr. Speaker, it is time for the House to call on the Liberal government to stop plagiarizing Justin Trudeau's failed policies and recognize that deficits drive investment and jobs down and the cost of living up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Comments, questions and commentaires. The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So let's talk about the deficits and how Conservatives left this great surplus, as the member alluded to in his speech. Stephen Harper had 3 surpluses. The first one was a $13 billion surplus. Now, you ask yourself, how did he end up with such a large surplus? Well, that's because Paul Martin left him with that $13 billion surplus the year before. The second year Harper was in this House, he ran a $9 billion surplus. And then after that, it was a deficit after deficit after deficit. Finally, when it got to 2015, like how he referenced how a surplus was left, how did they leave that surplus? They left it on the backs of veterans and by depleting our military investment to under 1% of GDP, the first time in recorded Canadian history. Can the member please explain how this great surplus in 2015 was left?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, his remarks reveal exactly the point here. There were 5 prime ministers between the 2 Trudeaus, and all 5 of them took fiscal responsibility seriously and...
Order. The Honourable Member on a point of order.
Brian Mulroney didn't run a single surplus.
Order. Obviously, that's debate. The Honourable Member for Calgary Crowfoot in about 25 seconds.
He's correct, Mr. Speaker. Brian Mulroney inherited inherited a basket case that's even worse than what we have today.
That's right.
9 years wasn't long enough for Brian Mulroney to undo the damage that Pierre Trudeau did to this country.
That's right.
Why do every time we've got somebody named Trudeau running this country, they destroy the energy industry in my city and bring fiscal and economic vandalism to Canadians?
Questions and comments. Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always amusing to listen to my Conservative and Liberal friends really dig their heels in about who had the lowest deficits or the biggest surpluses. In fact, Paul Martin had a surplus but cut transfers to provinces. That's the first thing. Second, my Conservative friend, I congratulate him for his speech. And I agree with him that the fiscal management right now is a catastrophe from the Liberals. It has been for quite some time. And one of the reasons it is that there's subsidies to oil companies and big oil. And my Conservatives, do they not agree that we need to cut the oil subsidies?
You know, I'll address one specific example that occurred under this government. And, you know, you hear them from time to time patting themselves on the back over the Trans Mountain pipeline, which they congratulate themselves for nationalizing what was private infrastructure, subsidizing it to a staggering sum. So we end up using public money to build something that should have been built privately, that would have been built privately if this government didn't chase the investment out of Canada.
That's right. Way to go.
Comments, the Honourable Member of Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my, through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate my colleague on an excellent speech, but I take no joy in it. Now, I take no joy in us as opposition having to bring this motion before this chamber. But my question is why? Why is this Prime Minister taking this country to the precipice? He comes from the private sector. He has personal wealth. Is he not hurting himself when he's bringing these disastrous policies to our country?
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Crowfoot.
I think the Prime Minister is probably pretty insulated from the damage that he's doing to the country. But and as to why and motive, I mean, I'd have to leave that to them. I have no idea why they are wreaking fiscal and economic vandalism on this country. I wish they wouldn't.
Comments, the Honourable Member for Courtney Alberni, about 33 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, my colleague, I have a ton of respect for him, but he brought up the job losses at Imperial Oil, 900 people. At the same time, Imperial Oil just posted that they were going to return $367 million to shareholders last quarter. Hey, we all want to see, you know, when somebody wins, we want to see them do well. But when there's excess profits like this, does my colleague, the Conservatives and Liberals, ever agree that there should be an excess profit tax that could help reduce deficits?
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Crowfoot.
You know, the phenomenon of share buyback is symptomatic of just how horrific the investment climate is in Canada. Businesses generally would love to invest in plant and equipment and technology and things that would increase productivity, but in this country, there is no opportunity.
Well done.
Resuming debate. Let's please to debate the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government, House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, no surprise on this side in the sense that the Conservatives have somehow come up with another Opposition Day motion in which they want to say that we are different, Mr. Speaker.